Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of this hour. Iran and the United States are set to hold further nuclear talks in Geneva on Tuesday, with Tehran signalling flexibility in return for sanctions relief. US officials say Washington is also preparing military options if diplomacy fails, as both sides seek to avoid escalation. Israeli media report the government has approved a plan to register large areas of the occupied West Bank as state property for the first time since 1967. The proposal, backed by senior ministers, could affect land long unregistered since Israel halted the process after the occupation. President Zelensky says Ukraine has agreed new energy and military support packages with European allies ahead of February the 24th. Kiev is seeking to bolster backing as it faces Russian advances and pressure from Washington to negotiate peace. French President Emmanuel Macron calls for calm after a 23-year-old activist dies from injuries sustained in a beating outside a political event. Macron and lawmakers Rima Hassan urge a full investigation and justice for those responsible. Taiwan's Foreign Minister Lin Chia-lung says China is the real threat to security and accuses Beijing of hypocrisy over UN principles. His comments come after China's top diplomat warned at the Munich Security Conference against efforts to separate Taiwan from China. Palestinian officials say at least 11 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes across northern and southern Gaza, including 4 in a displacement camp and 5 in Khan Yunis. Israel says it targeted Hamas fighters after alleged ceasefire violations, as both sides accuse each other of breaching the October truce. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio begins a 2-day trip to Slovakia and Hungary to strengthen ties with their conservative governments. The State Department says he will discuss energy cooperation, NATO commitments, and other bilateral issues. This comes after Rubio tells the Munich Security Conference that America remains committed to Europe, even as it pushes to reshape the transatlantic alliance. His remarks come after months of strain, including President Donald Trump's tariff threats and previous criticism of European allies. We start this hour in Europe, where US Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized that the Trump administration is not seeking to exert dominance over the continent. During his visit to Bratislava following the Munich Security Conference, Rubio stated that the United States welcomes Europe's shift away from dependence on US power. Let's take a listen in to his statements.
We don't want Europe to be dependent. Now, we're not asking Europe to be a vassal of the United States. We want to be your partner. We want to work with Europe. We want to work with our allies. We want to work in cooperation with you. And our point has been and continues to be, the stronger you are, both on an individual basis in terms of countries and collectively as an alliance, the stronger the members of NATO are.
This follows his speech at the Munich Security Conference, which contrasted sharply with US Vice President J.D. Vance's controversial address last year, focusing on European policies. As US-Europe ties faced strains, Rubio sidestepped MAGA flashpoints and culture wars, which had deepened rifts, notably over the US national security strategy. Separately, European leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen and Keir Starmer, called for greater defence responsibility within NATO in Munich. Joining us now to discuss the developments coming out of Europe is Raymond Vickery. He's a former US Secretary of Commerce. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Raymond, thank you so much for speaking to us. First of all, Marco Rubio's speech in Munich highly contrasted J.D. Vance's last year. What do you think drove the US Secretary of State to speak in the way that he has done? Is the US administration concerned that tariff threats, Greenland annexation threats have alienated Europe a bit too much?
Well, thanks, Thomas, for having me and allowing me to comment on this. Marco Rubio is a very intelligent man, but when he speaks of being a vassal, he is, of course, a vassal to President Trump. He knows that the approach on Greenland, on tariffs, on the kind of J.D. Vance sledgehammer approach, criticizing Europe on immigration, on limitations about speech which could lead to hate, and was a part of the whole Nazi approach to affairs. Marco Rubio is a different person, and he knows that approach is wrong. Nevertheless, he is a vassal to President Trump, and he must adhere to certain points in that. He has emphasized really cultural matters that are supposedly exclusive to Europeans. That has not been the policy of the United States. I mean, he's off to try to make amends with and strengthen a relationship with the two dissenting countries in the EU. So yes, it's somewhat of a relief, but I think what you're hearing from the Europeans is, yes, we have the message that the United States has abdicated its position as leader of the free world, and what we must do now is find our way forward, but we can't do it immediately because we do not have the arms, we do not have the coordination among all the countries necessary for that. So yes, it is amelioration, but it is no solution to the problem which has been created by President Trump and his approach to Europe.
Indeed, and as you've mentioned, Raymond, Marco Rubio is going to visit Hungary, and he's going to visit Slovakia, two countries which are seen as outliers in the European Union, particularly in their stance towards Moscow. What we have mentioned is the absence of speaking about these culture wars which have been going on, which is one of MAGA's focal points. Of course, we've discussed it many times. Donald Trump's national security strategy document, where he cites Europe's immigration problem, among other cultural issues, that the United States doesn't view Europe in a light way when it comes to those. How central are those culture wars, especially to the MAGA movement in relation to their relationship with Europe?
Well, they're very central because President Trump is nothing without his MAGA base. And every time he's asked to broaden his perspective, he doubles down on the cultural wars, on the immigration. And if you look at the national security strategy, it's plain that it throws Europe under the bus. The problem is that President Trump has a 19th century view of the world, and that is that great powers have their own empires and spheres of influence, and then the rest of the world makes a way on its own. The problem with that, of course, is that if you divide the world up that way, these so-called great empires with Russia in Europe, China in Asia, the United States in the Western Hemisphere, they rub up against each other. And that's a recipe for war. That's what happened in the 20th century, and it can happen again. And with nuclear weapons in the offing, it is existential in terms of the international system. So this approach is wrong, and the Europeans are trying to make the best of it, but they have a long way to go, both in unity and in being able to have the wherewithal to be able to have a deterrence, which has kept the peace for some 80 years now, until the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Do stay with us, Raymond. as we turn over to our next story, more from the United States. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that Washington is not disputing a European report that links Russia to the poisoning of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The joint statement from 5 European nations, including the UK and France, concluded that Navalny was killed using a rare toxin from a dart frog. Rubio acknowledged the troubling nature of the report, but clarified that the US chose not to join it, not due to disagreement, but because it was a coordinated effort by European countries. Meanwhile, Russia has dismissed the allegations as propaganda. However, Navalny died in an Arctic prison colony in February 2024 after being convicted of controversial charges. Let's take a listen into the statements.
To your question about the frog toxin, no, it's a very serious thing. Look, those countries came to that conclusion. They coordinated that. We chose, doesn't mean we disagree with the outcome. It wasn't, our endeavor. Sometimes countries go out and do their thing based on the intelligence they've gathered. We obviously are aware of the report. It's a troubling report. We're aware of that case of Mr. Navalny, and certainly it's, we don't have any reason to question it, or we're not disputing or getting into a fight with these countries over it, but it was their report, and they put that out there.
We move on to the ongoing Epstein saga next, and according to reports, how Jeffrey Epstein exploited student visas, sham marriages, and immigration loopholes to maintain control over women in his orbit. Files released by the US Department of Justice show how Epstein sponsored women's visas, arranged marriages, and helped them gain US residency through his network of lawyers and connections. One example is Karina Shuliak, whom Epstein helped secure admission to Columbia University and later facilitated her green card and citizenship. Epstein also urged English language schools to sponsor visas for multiple women, ensuring their legal stay in the US. Many were granted work visas, often citing their extraordinary abilities in fields like modeling and art. These tactics reveal Epstein's manipulation of immigration processes to keep women dependent on him as part of his broader system of control and abuse. Raymond Vickery joins us once again to discuss this. Raymond, from what we know, how was Jeffrey Epstein able to repeatedly use these student visas and work visas without triggering scrutiny from immigration authorities?
Well, thanks for letting me comment on this as well, Thomas. A democracy requires not only elections, which are free and fair, but it requires institutions. It requires rule of law. It requires belief among the populace that the institutions of law are not being subverted for the interests of a few. Unfortunately, the more and more that is revealed about the Epstein situation, it undercuts any faith in the institutions. It appears that Jeffrey Epstein was able to manipulate not only the women, but the entire apparatus of the rule of law. And he did this by being able to have connections with elites, by being able to conduct lawfare in order to be able to serve his purposes. So this is an extremely serious matter throughout the West, if you will. It's not just the United States, but it is particularly important here in terms of politics, because people may have trouble understanding tariffs and economics and the niceties of security, but they can see when there is being a subversion of the very institutions which are to protect not only young women, but the average people in the United States. And so as this, like an onion, becomes smellier and smellier with each layer that's peeled off, the faith in the institutions is undercut. And it's going to require the disinfectant of sunlight so that you can have a real understanding of how not only Epstein worked, but how he manipulated the system through a network of people who were high worth individuals or had positions of power. Until that all is coming out and there is action taken, it will continue to fester and will be a factor, I predict, in these midterm elections coming up in the United States.
Indeed. Raymond, do stay with us once again as we turn over to our next story and some more news from the United States. The US says it has not yet made a clear decision on the future of UNRWA, even as the agency's chief warns that dismantling it would create a dangerous vacuum. The head of UNRWA, Philip Lazzarini, said the agency provides essential aid, education and health services to millions of Palestinian refugees and that no alternative structure is ready to replace it. Washington has faced pressure from Israel and some lawmakers over UNRWA's role, but officials say humanitarian needs remain a key consideration. The issue comes as the conflict in Gaza continues to drive massive aid demands. Let's take a listen in to what the UNRWA head had to say about this.
The key issue in the US, my understanding is that there is no definitive answer because the interest of the US is also to be successful in this process. And if you get rid of an agency like ours before you have an alternative, you are also creating a huge vacuum. Remember what happened in Iraq in 2003. At the time, the entire administration has been dismantled. There was no alternative and people were...
Raymond Vickery joins us once again. Raymond, Donald Trump, hugely skeptical of the United Nations. UNRWA, of course, a part of the UN. Israel, a huge opposer to the work of UNRWA, accuses some workers of being part of the October the 7th attacks and Hamas in general, a fact that's hugely disputed. And we've also seen their headquarters in East Jerusalem be dismantled. What are your thoughts on the challenges that the United Nations is going through right now, especially under this administration? Of course, we've seen Donald Trump withdraw the funding from many different aid agencies in the United Nations. The US is in huge arrears, and Donald Trump's overall stance towards the UN is not that of a positive one. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Well, thanks for letting me comment on this as well, Thomas. It's plain here in the United States, as it ought to be throughout the world, that the goal of President Trump and his administration is not just to show skepticism about the United Nations, not in terms of reforming it, but to destroy it. This is the approach of the MAGA base, that United Nations is somehow world government. World governments are wrong, and it has to be America first. It has to be the nation first. And of course, that approach it did not work to prevent World Wars I and II, and that's the reason that we have United Nations. Now, some 66 entities associated or a part of the United Nations umbrella, which are doing good work, like UNRWA and others. President Trump has said that he's going to withdraw from those. And you will note that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, even in the course of his speech at Munich, saying that Europe and the United States had a lot in common, went out of his way to criticize United Nations. And of course, if the United States does everything it can to destroy the UN, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy about the UN. You can't say, well, the UN is completely ineffective, and then you are working to make it ineffective. And that's what's going on with UNRWA. And it's a tragic situation because, as has been said, There is no replacement at this time for it, which is effective in being able to alleviate human suffering in Gaza and in other kinds of situations. So this is extremely serious. And again, is a part of the 19th century view of what America's greatness should be, that it gets to rule its own empire, its own sphere of influence, and others take care of others with Russia first, or China first, or any national approach. And the way forward is not down that path.
Indeed. Raymond, thank you so much for taking the time. It's a great pleasure, as always, to speak to you here on NewsX World. We now move on to our next story and over to South Asia. The Baloch Liberation Army has given Pakistan a 7-day deadline to arrange a prisoner swap following the detention of 17 Pakistani soldiers. In a statement released, the BLA announced that it has already freed 10 soldiers, all identified as ethnic Baloch members of local policing forces. The remaining 7, however, are being held for their alleged involvement in crimes against civilians. The BLA claims these men were tried in a Baloch National Court and convicted. The group says it will release the 7 soldiers if Pakistan agrees to a prisoner exchange within the next week. The BLA also accused Pakistan of not acting on previous exchange proposals, warning that the sentence will be enforced if no progress is made. This move is described as the second phase of Operation Herof. The operation refers to a series of coordinated attacks launched by the Baloch Liberation Army on August the 25th of 2024, targeting the Pakistani army in Balochistan. Joining us now is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, an international relations expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast. What more can you tell us about this situation? Is it likely that this prisoner swap will be arranged?
Thank you, Thomas. It's very interesting. In the morning also we had a discussion on this, and in the evening certain important updates we have received. The way you have mentioned that 17 prisoners of the Pakistani security forces were taken up by the BLA, and 10 of them being locals of Baloch origin have been released. So now there are 2-3 important aspects here to deliberate. The first one is that DG ISPR of Pakistan has so far not issued any official statement stating that their soldiers are in custody of the BLA. So I think we need to await that, because once an official confirmation from the DG ISPR comes, I think the next step of negotiations with the BLA can happen. Second is, if we see the past precedents, because if you look at, there have been previous instances also where such kidnapping or capture of the security forces have taken place, and Pakistan authorities have not negotiated. So there is a strong belief now also that in case this this official statement comes through now, Pakistan military authorities are not going to negotiate in a release of BLA prisoners with the Pakistan army. So I think that brings into a larger concern that in case that doesn't happen, what action the Pakistan army is going to take to get their soldiers released from the custody of the BLA. And previous also we have seen that Pakistan army has resorted to kinetic measures. They have spread out their intelligence networks to find out the location where these people are kept, and then they have launched strikes. And most of the times when these strikes have been launched, they have also targeted the civilian population. And there has been a collateral damage. If I can give you a comparison, the way the Indian army works and the Pakistan army works is absolutely different. In Kashmir also, we have had similar instances at times when we had verified intelligence reports of the presence of militants in a particular house, but we ensure there is no collateral damage to the civil population there, which I think the Pakistan army does not follow. So it would be very interesting to know now, firstly, the statement of the DG ISPR, and secondly, that will the Pakistan army negotiate? Because if you see the past presidents, they have not done so. And the next aspect is that look at the terrain in Balochistan. It is not going to be easy job because you have large areas in the rural belt of Balochistan, including the coastal belt, places like Kech, Turbat, Dera Bukti, Kolu and all. These places are very, very difficult to access by the security forces, and we have seen that Pakistan army does not get into any kind of a guerrilla warfare with BLA, because BLA has a suicide brigade also known as the Majid Brigade. So it is a very, very difficult task for the Pakistan army also, in case these people have been kept in such inaccessible areas, to launch an operation to rescue the men, because previously also Pakistan army has suffered casualties whenever they went in for such an operation, and I think they would like to avoid in the present context.
Dr. Kochar, thank you so much for giving us that insight on that developing situation inside Pakistan. But that is all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.